Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So, al-Riba. Now, I'm dedicated a lot of time to prepare for just this chapter because I feel this is probably the most severest and severest, even a word. This is the most severe and controversial topic of our day, and it's severe because the sin is large, and it's controversial because it's everywhere, and some may even claim there's no escaping it. It's proliferated in all our actions, in our work, in our pain of, even our ability just to feed our children. It's all now become interwoven, intertwined with al-Riba. So we need to understand what is al-Riba, how do we understand its form and features, and what is this hukum. But before all of that, I want to also discuss, which is not part of the Dilal al-Talib, but I want to discuss some ahadith pertaining to al-Riba. So, عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال, and it's probably the only time I'm bringing evidence. Actually, no, we're just trying to get through the book of fiqh, but I feel that these ahadith pertaining to the evils of riba needs to be understood. اجتنبوا السبع الموبقات. Stay away from the 7 destructive sins. قالوا يا رسول الله ما هن? O Messenger of Allah, what are these 7 destructive sins? قال الشرك بالله. So the first one is idolatry. The worst of all sins, الشرك بالله. Then after shirk was sihr, magic. We're not talking about card tricks. We're talking about magic, dealing with jinn, sihr. After that, وَقَاتُلُ النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ. Taking the life of someone who Allah has protected his life, which we covered in Kitab al-Jihad. The ma'soom, killing the ma'soom. That is after shirk and sihr, murder. What's after all of that? أكل الربا, consuming a riba. After riba, أكل مال اليتيم, consuming the wealth of the orphan. So you have orphans and you've taken their money. They're vulnerable people. They have no idea how much money they even have sometimes. They have no capacity to look after it and even spend it. You've been given that chance or given an opportunity to earn reward from Allah and look after their wealth, and you chose to steal it. That's a major sin. وَتَوَلِّ يَوْمَ الزَّحْفِ, and to flee the battlefield on a day where the fighting is intense. So basically fleeing the battlefield. That's another major sin. So riba is worse than that, by the way. And finally, of the 7 mubiqat, of the major sins that the Messenger of Allah said to stay away from, وَقَذْفُ الْمُحْصَنَاتِ الْمُؤْمِنَاتِ الْغَافِلَاتِ, to accuse falsely the chaste, believing, unaware ladies of illicit sexual behavior. These are the 7 deadly sins. This is mentioned here, the mubiqat, the destructive sins that destroy a person's deen. And from just after murder, aklu riba. Next one. رأيت الليلة. So here's here. رأيت ليلة رجلين أتياني فأخرجاني إلى أرض مقدسة. So this is part of a long hadith where the Messenger of Allah was taken to, he says here, to the sacred lands, to 2 men. فانطلق حتى أتينا على نهر من دم فيه رجل. So he took me until he came to a river of blood. This river is of blood. And in that river there's a man, قائم, he's standing in this river. وعلى وسط النهر رجل بين يديه حجارة. And on the banks, in the middle of the river, there's a man with stones in front of him. فأقبل الرجل الذي في النهر. So the man is in the middle of the river of blood, trying to escape this river of blood. فأراد الرجل أن يخرج, and he tries to leave this river of blood. رمى الرجل بالحجر في فيه, and the man on the bank takes one of these stones and throws it at this guy trying to leave the river into his mouth. فرد حيث كان, and the stone was thrown in his mouth with such force that it sent him back where he came from. فجعل كلما جاء ليخرج رمى في فيه بحجر, and every time he tried to come to the back, the same guy throws a stone back in his mouth, sending it back to the middle of the river. فيرجع كما كان, and he returns exactly back where he came from. فقلت ما هذا, and the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked these two men, what's this? What's going on here? فقال الذي رأيته في النهر آكل الربا, the one who you see in the river is one who consumes a riba. This is one of the punishments in the hereafter for the ones who consumes a riba. And may Allah protect us all from such a punishment. Next hadith. عن جابر عن ابن عبد الله رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال. So Jabir said that the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم said, آكل الربا وموكله وكاتبه وشاهديه. Sorry, I thought the first part, sorry. لعن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم آكل الربا وموكله وكاتبه وشاهديه وقال هم سواء. The Messenger of Allah cursed the one who consumes the riba and one who feeds them, the one who wrote it down and one who witnessed it. These four individuals are all the same. Now this addresses the issue of those who say the riba, the sin for riba only applies to the one who takes the benefit, takes the riba, not the one who gives it, the miskeen who took out the loan. Here it says indiscriminately. He says here, this is narrated in Muslim, this is hadith sahih. All of them are the same. Why are they the same? Because you cannot establish the contract of riba without these pillars. The one who has the money to give the loan, the one who asked for the loan in the first place, the one who wrote down the contract to maintain this this agreement, and the one who witnessed it to reinforce and establish this hukm. If the witness denied it occurred, the contract it can't be enforced. If there's no one there to write it down, can't be enforced. If no one was there to ask for it, it can't be enforced. If no one there to give it, it can't be enforced. So these are the pillars of a riba contract. You have to have it. And that's why they're all exactly the same. عن أبي بردة ابن أبي موسى الأشعري رضي الله عنه. So on authority of Abu Burda, he said, قال أتيت المدينة, I got to Medina. فلقيت عبد الله بن سلام, and I thought I met Abdullah ibn Salam رضي الله عنه. فقال ألا تجيء فأطعمك سويقا وتمرا. Will you not come وتدخل في بيتي? Will you not come to my home so I can feed you and give you some dates and a sawiq. Sawiq is like some food that is made from grounded wheat and barley. So whatever food it is sawiq. So he invited him to come and eat with him. ثم قال, and he said to him, إنك بأرض الربا. Verily you are in a land of riba. بها fashion. You're in a land of riba where riba is proliferant, as in it's happened everywhere, everyone's doing it. إذا كان لك على رجل حق, if you have a right on someone else, as someone else owes you something, فهدى إليك حمل تبن أو حمل شعير أو حمل قط فلا تأخذه. And they come to give you, this person has a right on you, they come to give you and pay you some tibn, which is some chaff, or some barley, or some kind of food, to pay back the rights. فلا تأخذه فإنه ربا. Don't take it, for verily it is riba. This is a Sahabi forbidding another Sahabi from interacting with others because they are dealing with riba. Listen carefully. This is not me making it up. Everyone who knows me knows I hate riba. This is not me making it up. This is a Sahabi telling another Sahabi who wanted to feed him food, don't take any food or anything from these people, because their food and their money and their whatever it is, it's all riba. So it's preventing him or telling him to stay away from them and their mu'amala, because they're all dealing al-riba, which shows you the extent the Sahaba went to stay away from riba. This is narrated in Bukhari, so it's sahih. Al-riba sab'una baba. Riba is 70 chapters, you could say, or 70 doors. أدناها كالذي يقع على أمه. The lowest level of riba is like sleeping with your mother. It's like having intercourse with your own mother. That's the lowest level of all the different types of riba that can exist. The lowest of that is like sleeping with your mother. That's narrated in Bayhaqi, and who said it's the chain narration is okay, and it's sahih لغيره, meaning that the different chains are all hasan. Putting it together, they become sahih. So you can, same thing we did. You mentioned earlier about al-da'if that can be put together to become hasan. If a hadith is hasan, it can be put together multiple different chains to become sahih. So this is an authentic narration. Here comes another one. درهم ربا يأكله الرجل وهو يعلم أشد من 36 زنية. A single dirham, which is 4.25 grams of gold, of riba, that a person consumes, a man consumes, and he knows that it's riba, is worse than 33 occurrences of zina. A single dirham is worse than committing zina 36 times. And this narration here, however, is narrated by different people. And there was some kind of kalam. Some have said this narration is not authentic, and others said it's authentic. But Shaykh Al-Bani said this narration is authentic due to majmu' turuqihi, i.e. on their own they're weak, no doubt. But his view is that by the multiple different paths, they have all reached the level of hasan, of acceptability. But the point here is, we can see already the severity of al-riba, which is unfortunate how so many Muslims today, they will really easily get upset with their daughter or their son commits zina, and they are dead to me and blah blah blah, but yet they tell their own children to go out and get loans, go and get a mortgage, go and get so on and so forth. They don't seem to mind. Although committing zina 36 times is not as bad as one single dirham of al-riba. And I guess you can even draw from this a fa'idah. It says here a single dirham. It never just said riba is worse than this. It said a single dirham, indicating that there's actually an increased level of sin with the increased amount of riba. Saying that even if it's a small amount of one single dirham, that's worse than this. Meaning that if it was 10 dirham, 100 dirham, 1,000 dirham, that's obviously by virtue of the wording here, it's worse. Another narration عن كعب قال لأن أزني 33 زنية أحب إلي من أن أكل من أكل الدرهم ربا يعلمه الله أني أكلته حين أكلته ربا. So this is now Ka'ab, another one saying that for him, he's now saying, make a statement. For him, he's more beloved to him to commit zina 33 times than to take a single dirham of riba. And Allah knows that he knew it was when he consumed it. So we can see here that riba is not no joke. And here we have another one. علي بن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال نهى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم صلى الله عليه وسلم أن تشتري التمر حتى تطعم وقال إذا ظهر الربا الزنا والربا في قرية فقد أحلوا بأنفسهم عذاب الله. I want to focus just on the most important part here, not the part where it says that you shouldn't sell the food until it's ripe. We're going to come to that later on, actually, in the next chapter. But here, it says here, when zina and riba become manifest in a village, at that point, the punishment of Allah becomes manifest. They've invited the punishment of Allah upon themselves. They've invited the punishment of Allah upon the village. If they make riba and zina, easy, so it's all cool. And may Allah protect us and the Muslim nations from falling into such a thing, so as to avoid the punishment of Allah. عن ابن مسعود رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال, so on the authority of Ibn Mas'ud, he said, the Messenger of Allah said, بين يدي الساعة يظهر الربا والزنا والخمر. The signs of the last day coming close is that zina and riba and alcohol become manifest in the lands. Now, I'm not sure if this is referred to being manifest in Muslim lands, because it was already manifest in the non-Muslim lands. But definitely, if it becomes a thing that everyone in Muslim lands are just like, yeah, it's so good to have alcohol and zina and riba, that's a sign of the last day. It's a sign of the last day. And generally speaking, signs of the last day tend to be bad signs or bad events. It doesn't mean that everything that is a sign is actually bad, because there may be some signs that it's nothing to do with halal and haram, but it's just some of the things that was mentioned about riba. It was joined together with other two sins, riba, zina, and khamr. And the last collection of hadith, which I'll consider like a maw'idah, like a reminder for us all. And Ibn Mas'ud رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال, so Ibn Mas'ud said, the Messenger said, ما أحد أكثر من الربا إلا كان عاقبة أمره إلى قلة. No individual increases himself in riba except that the last end of his affair will be in qillah, in less. Now this could be less in monetary terms, or less in the dunya, maybe it could be in terms of happiness. It just says ila qillah, into less. It wasn't specified what it was, so we can leave it generic as it is. But the point here is, it's a warning to you, us, me, all, that don't think that because you're taking out a loan, you are increasing in anything. You actually are decreasing. You only are decreasing yourself. It could be in happiness. Maybe your mortgage, you're getting your house and you think you're going to have a nice happy home. Maybe that could be the reason for your marriage to fall apart, or your kids to even hate you, or for you to even lose your property, or whatever the case may be. Don't believe for 1 second that just by being taking out loans, that's going to necessarily increase you in anything. In fact, it will just do the opposite. Actually, there's one last hadith. Actually, I thought about this one. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, and this one قال, Abu Hurairah said, the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم said, and this one I brought here because I want everyone to think about the situation we're in now on planet Earth, right now. ليأتين على أمتي زمان. They will come to my nation a time. لا يبقى أحد إلا أكل الربا. They will not leave anyone except that they will be eating and consuming riba. فَمَنْ لَمْ يَأْكُلْهُ, but whoever has managed to escape actually consuming the riba, أَصَابَهُ مِنْ غُبَارِهِ, he will actually be afflicted with its dust. If that actually isn't now, if this statement, which is essentially prophecy, it says Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying this will happen in the future, in his own nation. If this prophecy is not now, when would that be? Can someone describe to me, when would it be? What scenario has to happen for that to be the case if it's not now? There's literally our wages, our savings, everything we want to do, even shopping in a supermarket, is all either directly riba or indirectly riba, as we'll see throughout the rest of this course. And this is from the i'jaz an-nubuwwah, this is from the miracles of the sunnah. However, there is some kalam, discussion about the authenticity of this hadith. Some ulama say it's authentic, some ulama say it's not authentic. But there are quite a few who said it is authentic. Like from those is Ibn Baz, as-Suyuti, so Ahmed Shakir mentioned is been authentic. Ibn Baz said it mentions it being authentic. As-Suyuti also mentions it authentic. But Shaykh al-Albani said he reckons it's da'if. So there is some kalam about this narration, but the reason why I bring it here is this is not used to prove any point that hasn't been proven already. This is not being used to prove a point that hasn't been proven already. We already know that riba is evil. However, this is almost like a potential indication of what we're going to be afflicted with, and it happens to be, even if it is not authentic, it is something we're witnessing right now, where ummah as a whole, in Muslim countries, are either involved directly in riba, or even their non-riba transactions are afflicted with riba by its ghubar, by its dust. So even if it's not authentic to the Messenger of Allah, it's still a true manifestation of what actually has happened today. Anyway, so we have a narration of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where it says here, and Abi Hurairah, the authentic on the authority of Abu Hurairah and Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ba'atha akha bani Adi al-Ansari. So he sent off one of the brothers of Adi Ansari, واستعمله على خيبر, to collect some dates from Khaybar. فقدم بتمر خيبر. He came back with some dates of Khaybar. Khaybar, as those who may know of the seerah, it was one of the villages, a Jewish village, who were well known for good ripe soil and making lots of dates. So he brought back some dates. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أكل تمر خيبر هكذا? Are all the dates of Khaybar like this because they were good quality? قال لا والله. No, والله they're not. يا رسول الله لنشتري الصاع بصاعين. What we did is that we got two measures of dates, low quality dates, and we sold it and exchanged it for one quantity of good quality dates. So the dates that came were good quality. It was because what they did is that they took two bad quality dates and exchanged for one quality of good dates. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Messenger said, لا تفعلوا, don't do that. ولكن مثلا بمثل, rather like for like, not 2 for 1, but 1 for 1, 2 for 2, 3 for 3, like for like. مثلا بمثل. أو بيعوا هذا واشتروا بثمنه من هذا. Or, if you're not going to do exchange like for like, sell your two measures of bad quality dates for money and take that money and buy your good quality dates with that money. وَكَذَلِكَ الْمِيزَانِ. That's how we establish the scales. And scales are often referred to as justice, things are even, the scales. And this, you could say, is the precedence or the introduction to our chapter of Riba. How do we transact and establish the scales of justice? So we have a hadith. أخرج الإمام مسلم. So Imam Muslim narrates a hadith of Abi Sa'id al-Khudri. And the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam قال, the Messenger said, and this is now we finished with the evils of riba and whatnot, and the reminder of how bad riba is. Now we're diving into the chapter of riba now. And we can't talk about riba without discussing this hadith. Trust me, it makes sense in a minute. الذهب بالذهب. So gold for gold. والفضة بالفضة. Silver for silver. والتمر والبر بالبر. And wheat for wheat. والشعير بالشعير. And barley for barley. والتمر بالتمر. And dates for dates. والملح بالملح. And salt for salt. مثلا بمثل. Like for like. يدا بيد. Hand to hand, as in immediate. فَمَنْ زَادَ أَوْ اسْتَزَادَ فَقَدْ أَرْبَى. And whoever increases this, is not like for like, or requests the increase, فَقَدْ أَرْبَى, then he has committed the riba. So here's the criterion. This is the understanding of riba. Whoever does that, then you have done riba. وَالْآخِذُ وَالْمُعْطِي فِيهِ سَوَاء. Again, another refutation of those who say that the requirement only for those who take the riba. The one who takes the riba, the increase, or the one who gives the increase are the same. This is the foundation of this chapter. So we have this issue of the same amount, same. Yeah, it says here the same quantity and the same time. Said here in the hadith, they have to be at the same quantity and the same time. Now we're going to go through the psychological and the practical situation. Yeah. So if you have at the same time and the same amount, then it's perfectly fine. This is a transaction which is described above. Same time, yad for yad, same amount, same quantity, like for like. However, if you have the same time but different quantity, then it's called Riba al-fadl. It's called Riba al-fadl. And this word fadl, I'll explain to you the words so they can make sense in your mind, because I don't want you to get lost in the words. Riba, we know riba, and fadl means ziyada. You can almost call it riba al-ziyada or riba al-fadl or riba of the extra, where basically you've done the transaction at the same time, there's no delay, but one person gave more than the other, gave the fadl, gave the extra. That's described in the hadith above as being a riba. However, what happens if you have the same amount? So 1 kilogram of dates and 1 kilogram of dates, or 1 kilogram of, no, so not kilogram, 1 bag of wheat and another bag of wheat, same amount. But there's a delay. I lent you this, or I gave you this, and then you gave me back this later on. So it's different. That's called a normal loan. I lent you this and you gave it back to me. That's a loan. Yeah? Well, how about if it's different amount and a different time? So again, I've given you one measure of dates, and you're going to give me back another measure of dates more than what I've given you, and later than what I've given you. That's called riba nasiah. And nasiah, again, let me translate the word. Nasiah means delay. So I've delayed it. And this is actually the riba we all know. Everyone thinks, when we say riba, banks riba. This is the riba we're referring to, with the delay. But what I want you to understand here is, look, if you look at these ticks and crosses, is what's happening, what are the two things we're looking at, and what happens when things go wrong. Effectively, the both scenarios that are riba is where the amount is different. So I've given and I've got back different amounts. So in both scenarios, it's riba. But when the transaction is finalized immediately, we call it fadl. And when there's a delay, we call it nasi'ah. But both of them both the thing that makes it riba is the fact that there's been an increase. Hence the word itself, riba. Riba literally means ziyada, increase. So fadl is the extra and riba is the increase. So if you want to translate riba al-fadl, it's the extra increase. And riba nasi'ah will be the extra delay, or the delayed extra. There you go. That's how you can understand the riba. And as it comes to the riba we know of now, today, with money, that's the same thing. We have money I'm giving you, and you're giving me back the same money later on with increase. But it's not just money, by the way. It's referred to even dates. I gave you dates now, and you give me back dates later on with increase. It's the exact same thing. Don't think in your mind that riba is only with money. Even the dates, just mentioned here, the hadith is even the dates and the barley and all the rest of it. Same thing. If you did that and go back more, it's also a riba. But one is called nasi'ah, it has delay, and one is called fadl, which is without the delay. Both have increase, but one without the delay. So, in regards to the riba nasi'ah, one is exchange of a certain number of goods of increase. Another one is, you can almost say, the monetization of time. We basically added a time component to the increase. Yeah. So bringing back to now the book Dalil al-Talib. In the book Dalil al-Talib, it says here, يجوز الربا في كل مكيل وموزون ولو لم يؤكل. It says here, everything that is sold in volume or sold in weight, yeah, then riba occurs in it. When we say riba, as in we just factored a minute ago, this increase, when it comes to transaction, the increase occurs. Riba will be in that increase. Even if you don't consume that thing. Because we mentioned dates, barley, wheat, salt. These are things you consume. But gold you don't consume. Silver you don't consume. So we're saying here that even if you don't consume it, it's still within this category. So let's have a look. Now, inside the book here, Dalil al-Talib, it goes through some examples of the makilat and the mawzunat. Those are sold in volume and those are sold in weight. Now this is not to limit what riba is applied to. These are just examples. So if you've got the book itself, you can follow. I've literally given the images so you can visualize what's been had, but basically give it lots of examples over here. So the first example says, وَمِنَ التَّمْرِ. So min al-thimari, from the things that are sold in produce, it says katamri, like dates, which have dates. That's the first type of which included. Was zabibi, which is raisins. Again, that's tamr. That's something which is sold, which is riba occurs in. Wal fustuq, pistachios, another one. Wal bunduq, which is walnut. I think hazelnuts. Wal lawz, mentions here, almonds. So if you don't know almonds are, that's what it look like, almonds. Wal batmu, wal za'rur. I couldn't find. I did find pictures of it, but it just looked like berries. I don't actually know what they are. I had to translate those two words. But the next one after the word inab was called jujubi. These are examples of jujubi things. Don't think I've ever tasted a jujubi, but that's what a jujubi is. And as you can see, you can almost see a pattern here. It's almost like dates and that kind of stuff. Well, mishmish, apricots, like dried apricots, is also an example of where riba occurs with. With zaytun, olives even. Olive, as you can see here, lovely olives. I used to hate them when I was young, but now I like them. Wal milh, also salt. Salt is something sold in volume. You can sell it in a bag or whatnot, sold in volume. So this is an example of things that are sold in volume. That is from the ribawiyat. Also, we have things that are sold in weight. Wal mawzoon, there are things that are sold in weight. What things like what? It says here, kadhahab, like gold, obviously. Then you have things like al-fadl, like silver. Also, he mentions here an-nuhas, like copper, because you could, like the same properties as gold and silver, it can be melted down and sold in volumes. So copper as well. Wal-rasas, I think it's lead. And also wal-hadid. You can see a pattern here, like metals, basically metals. It mentioned here وغزل الكتان والقطن. I couldn't find what غزل الكتان is, but I know what cotton is. So cotton, like basically if you sell cotton, like bags of cotton in weight, you might weigh it. And also mentions here والحرير, silk. Mentions here now someone's looking at it thinking, what is Muawiyah doing? Look at his Jamaica's coming out right now, isn't it? Hemp. So hemp, I'm not talking about selling it for smoking, obviously not for smoking, but hemp is used a lot for non-haram things like making material for clothes and whatnot. You can use hemp for that purpose. And before it became banned for the drug use, it was actually a large industry for hemp material and whatnot, and even hemp paper. Hemp is very useful outside of smoking. So don't be deceived by the image and get excited that Muawiyah is saying you can sell weed. Which is ironic actually, you sell weed in weight as well. Yeah, they weigh it, but yeah. Also, what's it called? Sham', which is wax. Another thing you can sell in volume. Was za'faran, saffron. Saffron is another thing you sell in weight, which is actually worth more than its weight in gold. Za'faran. Also things like khubz. Mentions here example of sorry, not khubz, jubn, sorry, cheese. So you can have a block of cheese, you can cut a piece off and weigh it and see how much it costs, and you buy your cheese like that. To this day they do that. And it mentions also al-khubz. Anyway, however, this is not included things that are sold in units, بالعدد, in number. Let's have a look at what the examples of that one. So it says here, وَمَا عَدَى ذَلِكَ فَالْمَعْدُودِ. Then things that are sold in number, وَلَا يَجْرِي فِيهِ رِبَا. There's no riba in things that are sold in number. Like, وَلَوْ مَطْعُومًا, even if it's edible. And this statement, وَلَوْ مَطْعُومًا, yeah, so even if it's edible. Like, كَبِطِيخ, like melon. Every melon is different. So one melon for one melon doesn't add up because one might be larger or smaller or heavier or whatnot. They're not the same. So riba doesn't occur in that one. Likewise, al-qitha, same thing. A cucumber, wal-khiyar, same thing. Wal-jawz, wal-bayl, for example, and also egg. So eggs are not sold in weight or in volume, but units. A packet of 6 eggs, for example, sold in number. Rumman, also pomegranate, again, same thing. And also, لا فيما أخرجته الصناعة. Also, those that things that are manufactured. So we're talking about not just raw materials, things that requires other things to make it, and then you make units of it, like a knife, like as-sakin mentions. So كالثياب, it mentions like clothing, or كالسكين, so your clothing as well. Or silah, weapons, it says there, so silah means weapons. And it mentions here in the book, I haven't got an image for it, but it mentions here in the book, al-fulus. Yes, you heard correct. And money. Is referring here to like coins. You know, for these copper coins that you've now got the copper and whatnot, even made these particular coins in units. Their value is in the units, not in its weight, so there's no riba in money. And also, it mentions here, wal awani, and vessels, like these pots and pans. غير الذهب الفضة, but the main exception, gold and silver. So if you have a vessel that's made from gold or silver, that's excluded from this conversation. It's excluded from this conversation. Even if it is a vessel made from gold and silver, it's not excluded. It's not excluded. It's actually included. It's the main exception for gold and silver. So that's that one. So as you can see here, we're seeing a picture. He's saying here from the hadith, الذهب بالذهب والفضة بالفضة والتمر بالتمر والشعير بالشعير, and the rest of it. He's saying here that if you look at these categories, we extract from this the volume and the weight. So anything that has volume, that is sold in volume, or anything that is sold in weight, they are from that category of the hadith. They're from that hadith. And it has to be mithlan bi mithlin, yadan bi yad. Hand like for like, hand in hand. So let's explore that. Okay, now we're going to go for some scenarios. How do these transactions take place, and what are the rulings of that transaction? So we have an if here. We have if the type, the jins, the word in the Arabic word is jins. So it actually says here, فإذا, if you go to the deal of talib, فإذا بيع المكيل بجنسه. If you sell the makil, this thing that is sold in volume, for the same jins, like, so you have two things to consider, the jins and or the method. So we sell the same jins. So we have here this walnut, or I think it's a walnut, or no, hazelnut, so it's a hazelnut. You have this hazelnut, and you sell it for another hazelnut. So a hazelnut for hazelnut, the same jins. So in the example, so في المكيل بجنسه كتمر بتمر أو موزون بجنسه كذهب بذهب. صح بشرطين. It's permissible to make this transaction, walnut for walnut, so hazelnut for hazelnut, almonds for almonds, gold for gold, silver for silver. It's permissible to make that transaction with two conditions. What's the two conditions? The first one, al-mumathala. So the method has to be the same. So the condition method is the same. It has to have the same weight, and al-qabd, qabd tafarruq. You have to also capture and settle the deal before you part company. Like the hadith said, mithlan bi mithlin, the same like for like, yadan bi yad, hand in hand. So the transaction has to be concluded immediately. The transaction has to be concluded and settled immediately. If they're both the same type and the same method. One more time. The same type, the same jins, and they also the same method, meaning volume for volume or weight for weight. The same type. Then it has to be the same time and the same an immediate settlement. Yeah? Okay, let's try it again. Imagine you have different types, so from different jins. He says here, وَإِذَا back to deal al-talib, وَإِذَا بِيعَ بِغَيْرِ جِنْسِهِ. So not from the same type, so from different types now. One is a hazelnut. I can't say hazelnut. One is hazelnut. One is a hazelnut, and the other one is pistachio. So they're from different jins now. They're from the same method, both volumetric, but the jins is different. So it says here, this is it. But فإذا بيع بغير جنسه, so for other than the same jins, كالذهب بفضة وبر بشعير. So like it says here, wheat by barley or gold and silver. So gold and silver will be the same weight, the same method is in weight, or bur b'sha'ir, barley for wheat, that's the same volume, both more volumetric, or like I got here pistachios and hazelnuts, the same type. In that scenario, صح بشرط القبض قبل التفرق. It's permissible to have differing in quantity as long as you settle immediately. Now let's explain why that is. Why is it different? Why is this okay now as long as you have different tafarruq? It says mithlan bi mithl. They have to be the same. So when you have a hazelnut and a hazelnut, if I have a bag of hazelnut and a bag of hazelnut and I say these are the same, I could say yes, they are the same. If I have a kilogram of gold and a kilogram of gold, if I ask you, are they the same? I can say yes, they're the same. But if I have a kilogram of gold and a kilogram of silver, can I say they're the same? No, I can't. Because a kilogram of gold is not the same as a kilogram of silver. They're not the same thing. So you can't actually get mumathala. You can't actually get equity or equality, that's the word, not equity, equality in the two items. Same thing with walnuts and pistachios. One sa' or one mud or one handful of hazelnuts is not the same as a handful of pistachios. So there's no way of actually attaining and actually getting a measurable equality between the two things. So because it's impossible to get equality, then we don't make that, it's no longer a condition. It's no longer a condition for equality because you can't actually get equality because they're completely different. So the only thing we say is, but you have to finalize the deal immediately. Yeah, you have to finalize the deal immediately. And he says in the book in Deal al-Talib, وَجَازَ التَّفَاضُل, and it's permissible to have varying amounts. It's permissible to have varying amounts. That's perfectly fine, as long as you settle immediately. However, imagine you had not only different types, but also different methods. So one is from cotton, which is sold in weight, for example, and one is sold in, and you have hazelnuts, which is sold in volume. So you don't even measure them the same. You measure one in volume, and you measure one in weight. So the possibility you can't get equality is even less likely than the first type. The first type, they were different. You had the same measure. One is volume, one is volume, one is weight, one is weight. They're the same type of measurement. So technically you can get the same measurement. But because they're different, you can't get equality. This not even the same measure. So the ability to get equality is even less likely, even less possible in this methodology because they're from different types and the different methods entirely. The method is completely different. So we can't actually say this is not fair, that one, we can't do that. So because of that, it's permissible to have different weights and even delay. There's not even the chapter of Riba. We don't even have it in the whole discussion of Riba because it doesn't even come into play. That's essentially what we have here. So in summary, before we move on to this part here, and this is all to do with Ribaa, al-fadl, the first type, when there's no delays. If they're the same jins, the same type, dates for dates, barley for barley, rice for rice, salt for salt, both the same. So you can actually measure them to be the same, and you can actually see when they're not the same. You can do that. Then you have to settle immediately and the exact same measure, because I can actually know for a fact that they are different. That one is more than the other. But if they're from different types, but the same measure, I still have to settle immediately. But there's no requirement to be the same, because they can't be measured to be the same. They're from different types. Yeah. And finally, if they're even measured the same, one is weight and one is volume, then it's so distant from even possibly having equality and even knowing one is more than the other, then it's not even we don't even factor it in as part of the transaction. You can do as you like. Delayed, not delayed, more or not more, it's all exactly the same. That's what we have going on so far. So I have one question here. So selling by number, like melons, example, is also riba? No, it's not riba. Things sold in number is not riba. So, for example, watermelons, each watermelon is different by nature. So one melon is not equal by virtue of it being melon to one melon. So you can't say, yeah, I give 1 melon for 1 melon. You can't get equality. There's no way to get a melon that's exactly the same. Which is why we don't sell melons in weight. I mean, I know what you're saying. I go to the market and I weigh it and I was selling. I know in that regards, I'm not what you're saying. But in reality, if you had a melon and you want to exchange for another melon, you say, okay, give me that melon, I'll give you that melon. It's sold in units. So it's the same thing with eggs. You have different classes of eggs. You have A class, B class, C class, and those refer to the sizes. Yeah? So you can't just say, give me 1 egg for 1 egg, to say equal, because no 2 eggs are the same. And likewise, and all manufacturing stuff, things that are made by virtue of it. So they're saying that these things are not ribawiyat. So I can, by virtue of that, say, here's a camel. I'm gonna give you a camel now, 1 camel now, with the agreement that you're gonna give me 2 camels next year. I can do that. I can do that in camels. I can do that in phones. I can say, here's an iPhone 12 now, on the agreement you're gonna give me back an iPhone 13 next year. You could do that because they're sold in number and manufactured goods. You can't, and there's no riba in those items. What will be the use to sell like for like? What would be used to sell like for like? Why would one buy a kilo of cotton for a kilo of cotton? Wicked question. No one really gains anything from it, or am I not understanding something here? You've understood something perfect. That was the exact question I had in my head for a very long time. I would say years. When I was in Medina for years, I didn't understand. Why would I want to give 1 kilogram of gold for 1 kilogram of gold? That's a useless transaction. But no, it's a very important transaction. And we see that in the hadith you mentioned earlier on, when he asked Abu Sa'id al-Khudri about the dates of Khaybar. How did he manage to get the good quality dates? Because he sold 2 bad quality dates for 1 good quality dates. So it's dates for dates. So to cut that off, the Messenger of Allah said, if you're going to do that, dates for dates, they have to be the same. If you're going to give your sukkari for your ajwa, that's your transaction, then it has to be 1 sa' of ajwa for 1 sa' of sukkari, and that's it. Like for like. But if you don't want to do if you think that's not a good deal, then sell your sukkari first for money or whatever, and take that money and buy the ajwa. Why? Because when you transfer the bad quality dates into money, you've quantified the dates, you've monetized it, or you put it into a form that we can agree upon what it means, or what its value, and from that value you can quantify about the good quality dates. Because if you went straight from the dates to dates, there's a bit of deception here. How is it equal? Is it equal? If you know, for example, that 2 sa' of sukkari dates is worth £10, and £10 can buy you 1 sa' of ajwa dates, We know that they're equal because we use the medium. We went from there to the gold, and from the gold back to the dates. That's why the Messenger said those exact words. ذَلِكَ الْمِيزَانِ. That's how you establish equality. I say, no, that this transaction here is actually equal that one. Because without that, I can deceive you a bit. I say, look, give me, 10 bags of those ajwa and I'll give you one bag for the 10 bags of those sukri dates and I'll give you one bag of the ajwa dates. And in that transaction, I've hidden within that a deception where it's not actually equal. I want to reveal the value of those transactions by transferring those dates to something else, and from that something else back into the dates. That we can do. So why would you do that transaction? You wouldn't do that. Hence, you're forced to do the other way of doing that. But then again, I thought to myself, okay, but again, same thing with gold. I understand the issue of the quality of the dates. There's good dates and there's bad dates, but gold is gold. Silver is silver. What are you talking about in quality of dates? Actually, no. There is quality of gold. And that even at the time of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was a dirham. Not all dirhams were the same. Some dirhams might have been clipped. Some dirhams were made in Iraq, while another one was made in Syria, and they were actually different weights. So you could actually I could actually have said to you, give me 5 Baghdadi dirhams and I'll give you 10 Syrian dirhams. And we have the same scenario with the dates and the good dates and the bad dates. You have also the good quality or the high quality gold and the bad quality gold. Or maybe the Baghdadi gold is more pure than the Syrian gold, which is maybe watered down a bit. Maybe one is 999 quality and the other one is 995 quality, so not the same quality. So if I just went straight from the Baghdadi to there's a bit of deception there, so I want to remove that gold into silver. And from that silver now I buy my other ones, and now I can establish the justice, I can establish the equality in that transaction. So the issue of mithlan bi-mithlan, yadan bi-yadan is to establish equality in these ribawiyat. So that explains how does this hadith make sense. And again, that same question you had, I had myself. Why would anyone do gold for gold and like for like? Because you have different quality of gold. So back to that same issue now. If I said to you, give me 5 Baghdadi dirhams and I give you 10 Syrian dirhams, the only way to make that transaction correct, we put it on the scales. How many kilograms is your 5 Baghdadi dirhams weigh? It weighs 10 kilograms. How much is your 10 Syrian dirhams weigh? It weighs 10 kilograms. Now we know it's equal, we can do the deal. I can do that because we know that it's the same exact weight and the same exact thing. Otherwise, we don't do that. So another question is, and by extension, how does selling currencies differ? We'll come to that in a minute. From your example of dates for dates, could I theoretically sell dates for gold, then use the gold to buy a phone? Oh, yeah, of course you can. That's we just mentioned here. You can sell. If you sold dates for gold, because dates is from the Ribawiyat, you have to settle. My mistake. Dates is sold in volume, and gold is sold in weight. So that's fine. You can sell it even with a delay. It's perfectly fine. Only issue of immediate settlement for dates is if you sold dates, if you exchange dates for something else also sold in volume. But a volume for a weight, you can do that. That's fine. So you can do that. That's fine. 5 Syrian dirhams could be better than the Baghdadi dirhams in his time. Then how is it going to be sold based on quality or weight? Yeah. So good question. So basically, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam established the mizan. How do you measure equality in these things in weight? At their time, the value of things was based on the weight. Just like the dates, the value of the dates in the body was established by volume. And the reason why you sell things by volume is because we can understand its value by its volume. So that's how you establish the two. So this would also apply to those people who sell those limited edition coins for more than they're actually worth. That's different. Remember, according to the Hanbali madhab, coins are not ribawi. And there's no riba in coins. So if I gave you £5, as in British pounds, I can actually get back from you next month £10, as in British pounds, according to the Hanbali madhab, because it's not sold in weight, it's a coin by units, and it's not ribawi in that regards. Does charging customers for products above market rate? So the issue of how much you charge is irrelevant. You can charge what you like. Anyway, let's move. So moving forward, but what of the reason for riba? I should say what is the reason for riba, but what is the reason for riba? Not what of the reason. What is the reason for riba? The ulama have differed in trying to understand the hadith. We mentioned the hadith. He said, بر بالبر شعير بالشعير تمر بالتمر ملح بالملح ذهب بالذهب فضة بالفضة. We mentioned all these things. So why are these things mentioned in the hadith? If we understand the why, then we can now use the same hadith for things that were not mentioned in the hadith. This is essentially qiyas, which we're going to cover probably next week. What is qiyas? So qiyas is where you take the ruling that is known by text. So we have the text for those things mentioned above. And we try to understand the reason behind that text. Why was that hukum mentioned? Once we understand the reason, then we can apply that reason to things that weren't mentioned in the text. So if someone asks you, is there riba in Bitcoin? Bitcoin was not mentioned in the hadith. The only way I can say riba is in Bitcoin is if I understand the reason for it, and that reason exists in Bitcoin. So if you understand the path of qiyas, that's how it works. So the first issue, some ulama, i.e. the Zahiriyya, those who reject qiyas, they don't accept analogy in fiqh, they would say no, riba is only in these things mentioned in the hadith. So there's no riba in any money other than gold and silver, because Allah Messenger only mentioned gold and silver. And if you try to put any other money into it, that's tahakkum. You're making up stuff as you go along because there's no evidence for it. If they say, yeah, but evidence is the hadith, al-burru bil-burri wa sha'iri, they said, look, that hadith mentioned those things. It never mentioned anything else. So therefore, you can't use that hadith as your evidence. And even some of non-Zahiri ulama have taken this opinion that it's only referring to these things. And one of the arguments was is that they would say things like, the scholars have differed as to what is the reason for it being a ribawi. So because they differed so much, this actually indicates that there is no reason. Listen carefully. Because mankind struggled so hard to understand what was the reason for these ahkam, that's indication that there was no reason for it, and that is ta'abbudi. Like, why is there 3 raka'ah for Maghrib as opposed to 4? There's going to be many, many reasons if you got mankind to try and think about it, because there's no way for us to know. So we could just guess as much as you like, but we're never going to get the truth. So they'll say it like that. So that's the first camp. There is no reason, and therefore riba only applies to those things in the hadith. But then you have the other ones who say there is a reason. There is a reason for something being ribawi. And the first reason is the weight and volume. We look at the hadith and we see that the burr bil burr, wa shi'ir bil shi'ir, wa tamr bil tamr, al milh bil milh, these are all sold in weight, in volume. We understand that. And the Messenger of Allah saying, wa dhahab bil dhahabi, wa fiddatu bil fiddati, that those are sold in weight. So those, essentially, the hadith has 2 categories, the volume side and the weight side. Yeah? And this understanding came from these 2 categories of weight and volume that we just mentioned before, we just spoke about before, comes from the understanding of the hadith, looking at the items used. So the hadith never said volume and weight. The hadith said items. But the Hanabila and others who take this opinion extracted from those items these 2 things, the volume and weight. So those who may be asking themselves, why volume and weight? That was an extraction. That was an understanding of the hadith, based on what was mentioned. And based on that, money and Bitcoin is not ribawi, because Bitcoin is not sold in weight, and fiat money, fiat pounds, dollars, yuan, whatever, they're not sold in weight or in volume. So therefore, they're not from the ribawiyat, and we can't enter them into the above mentioned hadith. However, things like, so there's no riba in that basically. However, things like metals and like crude oil, metals are sold in weight So as you can see here, if you see quickly, I don't know if you can see it clearly, but here he has like a molten metal being poured. Or like crude oil that's sold in barrels. Crude oil is sold in volume in a barrel. And like the metals are sold in weight. They will be included as the ribawiyat. They're from the things that are ribawi. However, there are other ulama who say no, I disagree with that categorization. I actually believe that when you look at these categories of bur and sha'ir and tamr and whatever, wheat and barley and they are sold in volume, but they're edible things. So the volumetric things are edible things. And as for the gold and silver, it's not to do with the weight. It's to do with the fact that gold and silver has value. Thaman, value. We use it to transact value. It's a medium of exchange. It's a medium to store value and transact value. So our criterion for what's the ribawi is edible things that are sold in volume and all things used to transfer value. So based on that understanding, money, whether even if it's a pound coin or Bitcoin, they are from the ribawiyat. There is riba in money. Because gold and silver wasn't chosen for gold and silver just because it had a weight. It was because it had value. And anything that has value is from the ribawiyat. So imagine we started to use cigarettes as money. I know we don't, but in jail they do. But imagine we start using cigarettes as real currency as we go to we do shopping with cigarettes. Then cigarettes will be a ribawi. Although cigarettes on its own is not a ribawi, but now we've made it a currency, it's now ribawi. Or imagine camel skin, which Imam Ahmed mentioned. Camel skin. If we started to use camel skin as actual means of exchange and it became something which everyone uses as money, now it becomes money, even though on its own, before that, it wasn't ribawi. So, because it has value or not. However, metals and things like oil, metals is sold in weight, and they don't even acknowledge weight as a factor. So that's not ribawi, as the first thing. And as for oil, that is sold in volume, but it's not edible. So therefore, that's also not ribawi. So we can see here that this understanding, why were those things mentioned in the hadith there? That understanding is determined how we interact with other things that are not mentioned in the hadith. Yeah? How it determines other things. However, I have, so someone be asking, so which opinion do we take? This one or that one? The Hanbali opinion or the other opinion? Now, I made a bit of an ijtihad here, and I'm going to explain to you my ijtihad. I believe all of them are true. And let me explain to you why. There's something called ikhtilaf al-tanawwu' and there's something called ikhtilaf al-tadad. Like in tafsir al-Quran, you might have for example, it says in the Quran, Allah says in the Quran, ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, guide us to sirat al-mustaqim, the straight path. Some Sahaba said that straight path is the Quran. Some Sahaba said that straight path is the Sunnah. Some said that straight path is the Khulafa Rashidin. Now you look at those differences of opinion, those different statements as differences of opinion. That they are different. One says Quran, one says Sunnah. That is different. Whereas ulama of tafsir say, no, these are not differences. There are examples of ikhtilaf al-tanawwu', i.e. they are all referencing and speaking about something from a different perspective. One is talking about one perspective, one is talking about another perspective, but they are all actually referring to the same thing, al-Islam. So the Quran, the Sunnah, Khulafa Rashidin, they're all part of Islam. So ihdina sirat al-mustaqim refers to follow the straight path, I follow al-Islam. From Islam is the Quran, from Islam is the Sunnah. And those Sahaba just expressed one of the whole. If you look at what we have here, the bur, the wheat, the barley, the dates, the salt, the gold, the silver. Some looked at it and saw the weight and the volume. Some looked at it and saw the volume as edible and the value and whatnot. But if you look at all of that, all of those things here, what we can see here is that what actually gathers them all is fungibility. So the question is, what is fungibility? Fungibility means whereby the equality or the equality of each individual unit. Meaning, if there was a bag of rice, and I said to someone, give me a bag of rice, so give me a cup of rice from that bag, and I got a cup, and I scooped out a cup of rice, it makes no sense to say, no, I don't mean that cup, I mean another cup. He'll say to you, bruv, they're the same. This cup, or another cup, or another cup, they're all the same. Why are they all the same? Because it's fungible. If someone said to you, bruv, give me a kilogram of gold. You got a vault of gold, give me a kilogram of gold. And he bought you 1 bar, kilogram bar. No, not that bar, I want another kilogram. He will say to you, you're making no sense, brother. They're both the same. This kilogram is exactly the same as that kilogram. They're exactly the same. And fungibility is a core feature of monetization, making something money. When you go to market and transact, how is it possible that I can go to you and say, I want an iPhone and take this? And he will take it knowing that he's going to use it to spend on something else. Why would he take your, whatever you're giving him, to now use to spend on something else? He would take that because he knows that wherever he goes, this bag of rice or this cup of rice or this kilogram of gold is the same to every individual that uses it. It's fungible. So fungibility is the property of money. And riba refers to money. So the sheer fact that you can use these things, if you look at all the list of things you had before, whether it's the wheat and the barley and whatnot, those were actually things we could use to transact as money. I can actually transact with you with wheat, and we can actually do business and commerce in the marketplace just using wheat. I can say, okay, how many this costs 5 bags, this costs 2 bags, I can actually quantify every single thing in the marketplace with bags of wheat, bags of dates, bags of salt. I can use those things as units of account. I can do that. So, so in essence, both opinions are actually correct. But what they need, what I feel that the criterion would be fungibility. If they are fungible, then riba would apply on that one. So if it can be used as a medium of exchange, then they are both fungible. So based on that, both money and Bitcoin and crude oil and metals can be used, is a ribawi. So even if it's a copper coin that is used, it's a ribawi. Even if it's Bitcoin, which hasn't even got a physical form, it's also from the ribawiyat. That's my own little ijtihad that I made on this issue. Now some maybe say, just as a question, I may say, but brother, who from the scholars before you said what you said? Now, what's interesting about this opinion, this issue of fungibility, is that this is not a new opinion. A qawlun thalith, or a new opinion, is something that's different from before. What I'm actually saying is that what was said before is all correct. Not that one is correct. I'm saying both of them are actually correct. So it's encompassing what was already said before, not bringing something new that wasn't said before, if that makes sense to you. Okay, so very briefly, I want to quickly draw to an end to this one because I don't want to keep anyone longer than I have to. How do we even frame money now? So this is the issue now, because we just mentioned that fungibility is a property of money, and I would say the ribawiyat refers to fungibility. So how do you even frame money then? So here we have gold, and here we have an item. Yeah, I have something in my possession, and you have something in your possession. I have something you want, and you have something I want, and we make the exchange. That's a transaction. That's what we covered, and both parties are happy, and blah blah blah. That's done. Yeah. However, what about fiat money? What about fiat? So in the past, going back to the past, we're going back to history now. In the past, we had gold that was essentially supported by a piece of paper. But what did that actually mean? It meant that I have a piece of gold, and there's a bank or a vault or a company or whatever the case may be. And I hand over my gold to that individual, and they issue a certificate, proof of ownership, you could say, beyond just word of mouth. They just issue a certificate. And that certificate was just given over to me. So that certificate represents this gold I've given him, you could say. Yeah. And that's essentially what most likely happened, how it all began. Yeah. And this issue of framing, how do you frame it? This in Islam is what we will call a Wadia. We're going to come across that in the next couple of weeks. Wadia. And what is a Wadia? Wadia is an entrusted item. I've entrusted an item to you to look after, which is what I did. And they gave me like a certificate which proves that I'm the one who owns this item. So especially if he takes loads of gold in his trust, how does he know who owns what? He gave you a certificate which shows that you own this and, whatever the case may be. So it's an entrusted item. And it's fully backed, meaning that this item is supposed to actually represent this piece of gold because it's a wadi'ah. So what's an example of a wadi'ah? If you look at here, like safety deposit boxes. Like safety deposit boxes, I have a box, put my money in there, and I maybe have a key to that box, and they have a key, or whatever the case may be. So that's an example of a wadi'ah. It's in there, and it's my thing, and I have maybe the rights to that thing in my possession. So them, the bank or the company or not, they can't touch it. It's not theirs. They are looking after it for me, but it's not theirs. It doesn't belong to them, so they can't touch it. They can't use it. It becomes amana, it becomes a trust. Meaning that if they locked it in the safe, put it nice and safe, secure, and someone came and robbed them at gunpoint, it's not their fault. As long as they did what they're supposed to do, it's not important. It's amana. Okay. The one who has the key or has the certificate is still the owner of the item. The guy who has the wadi'ah, looking after the gold, he doesn't own it, he's just looking after it. But the one who has the key, he's the owner of the item. And he can transfer the ownership to who he wants. He can say, look, this certificate is for that thing. You can have the certificate now. I've given it over to you. Now you have ownership of the gold. And now you can claim it with the certificate. So I can transfer the ownership because it's still mine. It's still mine. Or give him the key and say, here, you have the key and whatnot. And I can transfer and interact with that. So listen carefully, that's the first frame. Framing it in terms of a wadi'ah. These keywords are important. A wadi'ah. Okay, here's another frame. I'm just applying it now to Bitcoin. So I have my Bitcoin, and there's my Bitcoin address. And I send it to an exchange, for example. Here's an exchange, and I deposit the Bitcoin into the exchange. Yep. And they give me, you could say a certificate, which is basically my login address, which is basically your KYC, my proof. However way they've approved that you own it, you have access to it, and it's yours, for example. Again, same frame. It's a wadi'ah, it's fully entrusted to them, it's fully backed, so your proof or access to it, as in on your login screen, which shows your amount, that represents what is actually there, and it's one and the same, fully backed. Or maybe stored and they store it like in a treasure inside a hardware wallet, for example. And likewise, they can't touch it. If it's a wadi'ah, they can't touch it. They can't use it for loans. They can't do it for anything. They can't do it for tijara or business or investment. They can't touch it. It's locked in a software wallet. Maybe give it to a friend to look after. It's in their wallet, but it's a wadi'ah. They can't touch it. They can't interact with it. It's an amana. If they get robbed and they secured it, it's an amana. Likewise, you still own it. It's in their hand, but you still own it. It's a wadi'ah for them. And you could transfer ownership. You could say, look, this thing that you have, I'm giving it to you, and I'm transferring ownership to you, and you can do that. It's fine. Yeah. So that's a frame. Framing a transaction as a wadi'ah. However, we have fractional reserve banking, for example. How do you frame that? How do you look at that? How do you understand that? Same thing again. We have the gold. You have the bank, and you deposit the gold into the bank. And the bank gives you what? A certificate. What does that certificate say? It says it's a qard. It's a loan. It's a loan. It's not a wadi'ah. Listen carefully. It's a loan, not a wadi'ah. Because if it was a wadi'ah, they can't touch it. They can't use it. They can't spend it. They can't do anything to it. If they did, they're liable and they're criminal as a criminal activity and blah, blah, blah. But in this case here, it's a qard. So that certificate you have there is only a certificate, which is here, it's a debt liability. That certificate shows, it's a proof that he owes you money. It's just a proof that, imagine you borrowed some money from someone and they wrote down, he owes me money. That's all it is. It's just a certificate that he owes you money. Not that gold that's in their hand now belongs to you. It doesn't. So it says here, the asset holder, it's funny that things on top of it. So the asset holder can touch the item. She says it can. So the asset, one who holds the asset now, the bank, can interact now with the asset. He can use it. He can spend it. He can buy stuff with it. He can now because it belongs to him now. And remember that with you and your own banks, every time you deposit money into the banks, that money you're giving to the banks belongs to the bank now. It doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the bank. The bank owes you, but the money that you actually physically give to them belongs to them now. It becomes a liability, it becomes something they owe you. It no longer belongs to the deposit, what I just said. You can't say, bro, give money back, it's mine. No, they can't do that. It belongs to them now. And you can transfer this certificate that you have of liability to somebody else through what's called hawala. But that hawala has conditions. The hawala has conditions which we're going to cover next lesson, I think. But now that it's happened, the bank now can give that money to someone else. They get money to bank someone else. And that now demonstrates how, when it says that money is backed by gold, that becomes meaningless now. Because that money is not backed by anything. It's a debt tool, or a debt asset, you could say. Or they call it fiduciary media. They call it. They just prove that they owe you money, but they don't have to give you anything. So basically, this is an example of fractional reserve banking and how fractional reserve banking can work. So you get a piece of paper, or you get proof that they owe you money, and they use money to do other stuff with it, business or trade or whatnot. And that is essentially how fractional reserve banking or whatever, at this stage, but I'm not talking about what's now, I'm talking about this stage, would work. So imagine, could this be halal? Well, yeah, if he borrowed that money and he used that money for halal trade and didn't give you interest, and when you want to get the money back, it's a liability. You have to try and find the money to pay you back. But that's perfectly fine. All that is perfectly fine. Fair enough. Then we have, later on, we had fractional reserve banking from the government level, where the government essentially had loads of gold. And they had loads of money, which they printed, which is supposed to, this money that was printed was supposed to represent the gold that was in the vault. And they even said, they would even say on the paper, you can claim back the value of X amount for this dollar, for example. This was banking at their time, and essentially it was a qard. It was a loan to them. You can frame it as a loan to them, and as a debt liability that is either fully or partially backed. When I say fully or partially backed, meaning if it's fully backed, therefore you could have framed it as a wadia. You could frame it as a wadia. The government has that money in the bank, and that claim on that thing. The reason why it's not really wadia is because a wadia would have a particular right and claim on a particular item. So if you deposited 1 dirham coin, that particular coin is yours. Whereas when they say they'll give you back the value of it, they're giving back an equivalent value, which is now equivalent to a liability, which is why it's a qard. It's not actually a wadia. So fully backed, which means that every paper out there equivalent to a level of gold. And partially backed basically means that they may have spent that gold or printed more money, and therefore if everyone was to claim back their money, the government would be insolvent. Why would it be insolvent? Because they can't pay back the money that they owe the people because they don't actually have the gold available to pay it back. That's a bit of a time date, you could say, of what kind of happened in the past at each particular stage. And then we had a stage where we went to total fractional reserve, total something else, whereby literally a divide was placed between the gold and the paper. This was now a hard default. Before, they were like stealing your money, saying that if you said before that this money was equivalent to that, and they basically stole that money, They owed you, but it wasn't actually there. Now, by saying you can't even redeem your certificate for the gold, that was a hard default. They defaulted on their loan. They're actually saying to you, that paper that we wrote on there, that we owe you gold, we're not going to pay it back to you anymore. That's obviously haram in Islam, obviously. In Islam, the government and the judge will normally force the debtor to pay back the money if they can, or do what's called iflas, which we're going to come across later on, which is for bankruptcy. But this is the government. The government is the one who is doing it. So essentially, when the money was detached from gold, that was literally actual theft. Before they just owed the money, but now it was a complete detachment and it was literal theft of money. And the question is now, is it a qard then? This paper that I have in my hand, that was supposed to be worth X amount of gold, now is not worth X amount of gold. So what is this paper now then? As in literally at the time it happened when Nixon detached the currency, this money was, or this paper was now worth less. Because it was a debt instrument, that's the word I'm looking for. It's a debt instrument that can never be redeemed. Basically like saying, it's like if I borrowed money from someone, I said, yeah, I owe you £100. So I'm the one who owed £100. And then the person came back to collect the money, and I said, I'm not going to give it to you anymore. I have the money, but I'm not going to give it to you more. So I am now what's called mumatil. I'm personally delayed, I'm not going to give the money back. So this person who wants to claim money back from me was to redirect the debt to someone else, do hawala to someone else. That hawala is not allowed because I'm not giving the money up. So that even transferring that debt to someone else wouldn't work. So what is, if I can't use this instrument here to transfer value to someone else because it can never be redeemed, what is it? Is it a qard? It's a debt liability to a mumatil, to someone who's not going to pay back the debt. So it's actually theft. So at the point where that happened in 1971 in America and other countries at different periods of time, that was literally the government stealing the money from the people and the people being left with worthless pieces of paper. But people still continued using the paper as though it had the value of before. It became its own thing. Yeah, it became its own thing. So on the assumption that the paper is no longer backed by gold because no longer required the backing by gold, it's now its own thing, assuming that's what it was. That will be the money that was present at that time. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm saying that I'm trying to frame what happened to that money that was no longer backed by something or no longer a representation of something to now being what it is. That's essentially what we're trying to frame here. So here we have the banking system. Yeah, here we have the banking system. So this money that existed is with the bank, for example. And what I want to frame here, what I want to explain here is how evil and messed up the system currently is. And I want to highlight what exactly is money in the first place. Because we just discussed what money is, we discussed what Ribawiyat are and all the rest of it. But is money even from the Ribawiyat? Fiat money? Let's have a look. You got my guy here. He wants to buy this house. So, and this house is worth $500,000. He himself has about 30,000 K a year he earns, and he has in his pocket about 20,000 K cash. So that's what he has, and that's what he can do. And the house is, that's how much it's worth. So he goes to the bank and says, and between him and the bank, there's no obligation. The bank owes him nothing, and he owes the bank nothing. There's no obligation on this account. It's zero balance. He goes to the bank and says, yeah, I want to buy that house over there. So what do the banks do? They literally form the money out of thin air. What they don't do, listen carefully, what they don't do is use the money that's down there. See that money underneath the bank? They don't use that money to give you. They use newly printed money, newly existing money on their hisab. They ask for the deposit. They take the deposit. Yep, they take the deposit that he has, $20,000 deposit, and they issue him this freshly printed money, $480,000. So now on the accounts of the bank, they have double entry accounting. You have the bank has minus $480,000, and on your account you have plus $480,000. So if you look at that, essentially there's still zero there. There's still zero there. As in, if you add those two things up, minus 480,000 and plus 480,000, that is still zero. But the banks have permission to do that. When you're a bank and you have a banking license, this is what the license allows you to do. It allows you to invent money out of thin air on the premise that it will eventually be paid back and go into non-existence. So it previously doesn't exist. They brought it into existence on the premise that there's a negative counterparty, which is the negative part, yeah. And they use the house as collateral. So they say, we give you the money, but the house that you're gonna want to buy, we're gonna put that on our balance sheet, on our books, to back up this loan. So essentially, this £480,000 that they gave you is supposed to be kind of backed up by the value of this house on the other end, you could almost say. But number one is from an Islamic perspective, the person who's taken a loan has no claim over the house to make it a guarantee, to make it a rahan. Obviously, you have to have money, you have to have it to use it, but they don't have it yet. And they issued the money before even the transaction took place. So the money is there, and that was part of the transaction. So the money was created and backed up by something that he didn't even have. This is not to say, by the way, that this house belongs to the bank. It's not belongs to the bank, it belongs to you. This is the issue, be careful. The bank belongs to you, or belongs to the person borrowing the money. It's in his name, it belongs to him. But it's used as a guarantee for the loan. So that's how the bank basically stays afloat. Because at the moment, without that house there, the bank is in debt. Or the bank, I should say, issued money that it doesn't have. So to justify that, the house is placed on that. And then once he now has that money, and that collateral the house doesn't own, he essentially now hands that over to the owner, and then the house belongs to him, and that's how a transaction took place. But the question is, what is this money? This money that we pointed at right here, what is it? Because before, when we had money, that money was a promissory note, a fiduciary media, a promissory note to gold that existed. This money here, however, refers to what? As in, a person who has now sold the house and now has his money, now he's going to do shopping and do the rest of it and live his life. This money, is it a promissory note to pay something back? He's not paying anyone back. He's got the money. He's finished. This guy owes nothing to no one, but he has the money in his hand. So has the first guy number A, transferred over to him a debt to pay back something that doesn't exist? And who owes what? So the guy who now owns the house, he owes money. He has to now go out and earn money to pay it back. And the money he's earning is exactly the same thing. It's also someone else's borrowed money. So essentially what we see here is that all the money that is fiat that exists into existence today is a transfer of a debt of something that doesn't exist. And who owns what to whom? Another question. So we can see here that fiat money doesn't even exist like the money we know from before, i.e. like gold or silver or even like Bitcoin. Something actually exists in of itself that we can actually transact. Fiat money is a promise to pay back something. It's a debt. It is a debt tool. And then we have the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Naha Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam an bay' al-kali' bil-kali'. The Messenger of Allah forbade from selling a debt for a debt. So transacting in fiat money is actually transacting in a debt. So every time we do money transfer, money exchange, all that kind of stuff, you actually just exchange one debt for another debt, which the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam specifically said, you cannot do that. You cannot exchange a debt for a debt. Even the issue of hawala, we're going to come across hawala next time, so we'll leave the discussion from hawala. But there are rules and regulations that determine when you can do hawala, how you can do hawala, can you even do hawala, whatnot, and so on and so forth. And also the previous transaction which we had, combining two transactions in one, the transaction of getting a loan and also buying something else, buying a house. Those are two separate transactions, buying a house and giving a loan. There are two transactions that are put into one, which you also cover, which is also haram. So you can see here that the whole system from its root and from its core is evil, and it's wrong, and it's haram, and it's not even really even money. So in saying that, hopefully now you've understood why I believe that every Muslim needs to transact and move away from riba at all costs, even if it means holding gold or silver or Bitcoin, even if the volatility of it is high or whatnot, it is better than what we have here from riba. And we've covered already the sins attached to a riba. Anyway, so returning back to the book, I want to quickly finish up this chapter. So we covered this already, and we covered already with pictures and the types of things that are mawzoon, makil, and things that's holding number, and when you can sell and what you can't sell. And so we covered that already in images. So that's something we've covered before. So now we have another question. If you sell, now there's another part. So it has some conditions out. The issues of mumathala. Actually, no, we covered this already. If you sold, so we're going to go through the text. So if you're following the text of Dalil al-Talib, we're going to go through it already. So if the item, it says here, the translation, if the item sold by volume, another item sold by volume, for the likes of it, then you have to, gold for gold, and that's have two conditions. First condition is exactly the same. Another one is that they have to take possession immediately. We covered it already in the previous slides. If the item is different in terms of this different jints, but the same type likewise, then you can have tafadul, but you must settle immediately. Another one, if you sell an item that is normally sold in volume, for that which is normally sold in weight, like selling wheat for gold, for example, then it's permissible to have varying quantities and even delay, part come before delay. So that's what we covered already. Just to conclude, we get some last questions. And these last points here finalizes and solidifies the interaction between the ribawiyat and how basically what we're trying to establish here is, are these things that are fungible equal? ويصح بيع ولا يصح بيع المكيل بجنسه وزنا. So it says here, it's not permissible to sell something, an item sold in volume for weight, meaning I can't sell dates for weight. So I can't sell dates for something else and use weight as a measurement, because you can't know equality in weight. You can only know equality in dates in volume. And likewise, you can't sell items that are normally sold in weight for volume. So you can't sell, for example, gold for volume. How much can gold fill this cup to another gold fill this cup? You can't do that because you only know equality in gold in weight. You don't know equality in volume. ولا يصح ولا موزون بجنسه كيلا. Okay. Again, let's expand the issue of equality. ويصح بيع اللحم بمثله إذا نزع عظمه. You can sell meat, so meat, yeah, for the likes of something else other than meat, because meat is sold in volume, as long as you take out the bone, because bones affects the weight. So once you remove the bone and have the raw meat and the raw meat, then you can now use the scales and have equality. وبحيوان من غير جنسه, and other animals in other jinns, you can do so with different jinses, with different types. But this is like for like, meat for meat. Obviously, if you buy meat for gold, it's a different thing. ويصح بيع دقيق ربوي بدقيقه, and you can sell flour, which is basically wheat but grounded flour, which is flour from wheat, is obviously ribawi because from wheat. إذا استوى نعومة مخشونة. So if you have flour, you have wheat but it's been ground down to flour, and you want to exchange it for another person who's giving you flour but grounded, how do you guarantee equality when they've been grounded down? If they are both the same texture and roughness, then we can say, okay, they're roughly equivalent. Whereas if one is really rough and one is really soft, then there's no way to guarantee mumathala, that they're both exactly the same. Actually, I need to put it on the screen. So that's regards to the meat and removal of the bone. And it's permissible to sell flour from another type, which I was mentioned there. So if it's both the same, in في رطبه برطبه, they're both the same level of moisture. ويابس بيابسه, and all the same level of dryness. وعسيره بعسيره, and also the same, if they're juiced or they're squeezed, the same level of quantity, if they're both squeezed the same way. ومطبوخه بمطبوخه إذا استويا نشافا ورطوبة. And if they're both cooked, for example, even if they're both cooked, they have to be both the same. You have to be able to determine, are they equal? If you can't determine whether they're equal, then you can't exchange like for like. You can't have a soup for a soup, or some dry dates for. Basically, you can't exchange, for example, dry dates for moist dates, because the moisture affects the amount, the weight, or the volume, or whatnot, and therefore you can't guarantee equality. You can do moist date for moist dates or dry dates for dry dates. We can't do dry for moist or moist for dry, because there's no way to guarantee that they are equal. Okay, last bit. ولا يصح بيع فرع بأصله كزيت بزيتون وشيرج بسمسم وجبن بلبن وخبز بعجين وزلابية بقمح. So this is another one. You can't sell the derivatives for the asl, meaning, if it says here, like for example, olive oil for olives. I can't give you a liter of olive oil for a liter of olives, because the extraction of the oil would mean that they're no longer be equal again. Likewise, sesame seed oil for sesame seeds. You can't have the same equality here, because the extraction of the oil means they're no longer equal anymore. Same thing with cheese and milk. You can make milk from cheese, so they're derivatives, but you can't have equality in that, because it's been changed, so you can't guarantee equality. Same thing with bread and dough, you can't get equality, and so on and so forth. And julayba, I don't know what julayba is, it mentioned jalabiya. Sorry, jalabiya is like the jalebi, you know jalebi, that the Asians have that jalebi, that circular thing, for the flour. You can't have that derivative from the actual flour. You can't exchange one for the other. I can't give you jalebi for flour, because there's no way to guarantee equality. So like that's the issue of riba, al-fadl, or the riba wiyat, there has to have equality if you're going to exchange one like for like. ولا بيع الحب المشتد في سنبله بجنسه ويصح بغير جنسه. So likewise, if you have wheat still inside its sheath and before extracted from those that is extracted, again, because you can't guarantee equality, then it's not permissible. Almost to the end, guys, almost to the end. Sorry for the delay, but almost to the end. ولا يصح بيع ربوي بجنسه ومعهما أو مع أحدهما من غير جنسه كعجوة ودرهم بمثله. So basically what he's saying here is, I can't sell you one, like I can't do exchange for one and the other and something else. Meaning, I have gold, and I exchange that gold for your gold. So gold for gold, but I add on it a bit of silver. So I've got 10 Iraqi coins, and you got 20 Syrian coins. And I say, yeah, I'll give you 10 of these for 20 of that, and some silver on top of it. You can't do that. You can't mix that. So he mentions here like كمد عجوة ودرهم بمثله, like a handful of ajwa for another handful of another type of dates with a dirham. That's that form of hila. You're trying to get around this whole mithl bimithil. You do the mithl bimithil. So I have a one mud of dates for another mud of dates. So they're like for like, but then you add on to it something else to increase the value. Again, you can't do that, because again you're trying to get around the whole mumathala. Or dinarun wa dirham bi dinar. So you're given a dinar for a dirham and a dinar. You can't do that exchange. ويصح أعطني بنصف هذا الدرهم فضة بالآخر فلوسا. Obviously, this last part here, it says here, it's permissible to say, give me this silver dirham for the other non-silver coin. You can do the mumathala, this thing, for dirham and coins. Because remember, because the Hanbalis, don't consider coins from the ribawiyat. Obviously, if you do consider coins money, fiat money, or other money, not fiat money, other forms of money which is not gold and silver to also be from the ribawiyat, then this wouldn't be applicable. But it's saying here it's okay because coins are not ribawiyat. And lastly, ويصح صرف الذهب بالذهب والفضة بفضة متماثلا وزنا لا عدا. So this is it's permissible to exchange. This is not to money exchange. Money exchange. And here's where you can kind of reveal where the Hanabila, although they have this issue of its weight and its volume, they also recognize at some level value. Because here they have a whole chapter, a whole section, subchapter of, or subsection, dealing with money exchange, value exchange. So see, I can give you gold and silver if it's equal, mutamathilan, the same to same, the same weight, not number, not quantity. بشرط القبض قبل التفرق, with the condition they have to hold it. What we just had before, say you have to finalize at the same time. أو يعوض أحد النقدين عن الآخر بسعر يومه, or exchange one for the other for the value of its day. Meaning, imagine you want to exchange one for the other, but when it came to finalization, the person wanted to settle the deal in another currency. You can do that exchange, but that exchange rate is set by the value of the day. Whatever the market value is of the day, you can set that transaction, and that will be it. So that's what we have concluded as the chapter of Riba. So to conclude, what I would say in terms of Riba, the money we have today, the fiat money we have today, from its very beginning, is Riba. Transacting with it is transacting one debt for another debt. It's all a debt instrument. And worse than that, it's a debt instrument which cannot even ever be paid because it's not attached to anything in particular. It's not attached to anything in particular. So this is one of the issues that we have today of our current monetary system. And now we can understand a bit better how to frame money today, as well as how we can frame even Bitcoin today, and how we can frame it in terms of holding Bitcoin and transacting Bitcoin and so on and so forth. So that's the chapter of Riba. But there's more to be discussed. I mean, I'll probably discuss more of it in later lessons, because we have to discuss lending. So we discuss issues of Riba and that. We have to also discuss hawala, transferring of debts. We'll talk about Riba again. So we have more discussion about it later on. But for now, we've covered enough. Any questions we have on that? And oh wow, there's loads of questions here. So let's have a look at the questions. 5 Syrian dirhams. Okay, that's not one. So this would also apply to those people who sell limited. I don't know already. Does charging customers for a product above market value count as riba? No, not at all. It will only be riba if you're selling that item to them in exchange for the same jins. So if I'm selling rice and I'm receiving in payment rice, then riba does apply. Or if I'm selling rice and I'm receiving in payment dates, then riba applies. But if I'm selling rice and the payment is in gold, then it's perfectly fine. Does charging customers... I just read that one. I watched a video of Sheikh Asim Hakim a few years back regarding the permissibility of crypto. One of the reasons he believed is impermissible is because it can't be traced and therefore is more susceptible to being illegal sales and so on and so forth. So yeah, that particular video, I answered every single point in my own videos. I'll put the link in the group later on. So refer to, it's no point in me repeating what I said here. I've replied to everything he said there. Slightly off topic, would you know your thoughts? I guess that's the same thing. Yeah, that's it really. Any other questions? Does everyone have any questions besides what was already asked already? You can unmute yourself.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum salam.
I just wanted to ask a question just for this last point regarding the fact that fiat currency right now is basically constant repayment of debt.
Yeah.
So is it a thing where, because there's no way to get rid of that, because the central banks and the governments have decided to change the way money works, does it mean that by definition, if it's still riba, is it by necessity that we're able to use money as it is currently?
So essentially what you're asking there is essentially what all ulama agree, from my understanding, I don't know anyone who differs really. Oh, but I'm sure there might be some who differ, but all ulama agreed that the current system we have now is not Islamic. They all agree upon that. But some allow it because of what's called darura, necessity. Now, some have said that the actual money we have, fiat today, is money, and they say the backing of the money is the economy or whatever they say it is. But as you've seen today, the reason I went to this effort today is to explain that explanation of money is not valid, as in it's not correct. The money is not backed by economy. The money itself is backed by interest. We already covered already that when you transact with something, the thing you transact in has to be halal. So if an interest-bearing loan itself is haram, and the units and the material you use is haram in the first place, giving it to someone else is also haram. So imagine I took out a loan, I borrowed money for riba, and this thing that came into, it didn't exist before, it came into existence due to the loan. As opposed to, for example, let me start again. Imagine the bank had gold, and the bank gave you that gold as a loan, and you can transact, and you transacted, yeah, that gold is fine because the gold is gold. But they never gave you gold. They never gave you anything. They gave you something that only exists because you asked for a loan, of riba loan. It only exists because of riba. Its whole entire existence is ribawi. So that makes itself, its essence, haram. And transacting in haram is haram. Not even including the fact of the transaction of a debt or selling a debt for a debt. That's another. I mean, if you look at this situation, it's compounded. There's so many levels of haram onto it. It's actually huge. But back to the issue of what you said is that, okay, we have this now. We have no other option, quote unquote. Then therefore it's allowed. Yeah, so ulama say if that's all that we have and there's no other way to exist except by this, then it's allowed due to darura, necessity. As the I guess principles say, al-darurat tubih al-mahdhurat, that necessity makes the haram halal. Not because the thing now actually is halal, but because there's no other way to transact without that thing. But that same principle, the same qa'idah, al-darurat bil mahdhurat, only applies if there is no other way. If you have another way, then it now becomes haram again. And there's no, you can no longer say, oh well, brother, I have to. You actually don't have to anymore. If you know a brother, he accepts Bitcoin as halal, and he has Bitcoin himself, and you accept Bitcoin as halal, and you have Bitcoin yourself, what excuse do you have to still transact in fiat? I mean, answer the question. If you know that you can only transact in fiat based on darura, there's no other way, and you actually have another way, then is it still halal to you to transact that way? I'm not going to answer that question. It's for you to decide yourself. But this is down to that one question. It is permissible if there's no other way, especially if the government forces you. For example, some governments, I think like Turkey, for example. Turkey has a law that you must transact your daily business or commerce using Turkish lira. No euros, no pounds, no dollars. It must be in euros. So by that, you will actually be a criminal if you used anything other than lira. So you are compelled. I get that. Forget that. I get that. That's fine. You can say you're compelled. But it's between you and Allah how you really interact and what you really do. But back to the point, we know without a shadow of a doubt, by admission of central bankers, by admission of those who behind the system, that this is how it works, we know that this is fundamentally not permissible, not halal. And that's essentially my only answer, really. I mean, what the ulama say about it, what they do about it after the fact, I don't know. I mean, I'm not at any level to say, yeah, you must or you must not. I'm just here to explain to you what actually happens. You're here, you're reading in the books yourself what the hukum, what the ruling actually is in Islam. You can connect the dots yourself. Any other questions? Oh, Wadia, did I answer your question?
Yeah, and I think I'm sorry if I've asked so many questions today. Do we ever cover things like stocks and bonds in this in these lessons?
So stocks will be an example of sharika, business partnership. So that's in that chapter. And a bond is essentially a bond is what we have right now. Actually, what we discussed today is a bond. When someone issues a certificate based on a loan, a coupon payment, that is essentially a bond. A bond is basically a certificate that guarantees you interest on your loan. That's what a bond is. And based on that definition, it's haram. So a bond is a riba instrument, and all bonds are haram. So that we have covered that one. And there are no forms of a bond that would actually be halal unless you pay back exactly what you got. So if I'm a government and we need to raise money for building roads, so we issued £100 million bond or bonds to raise money for these roads, and others from the public, rich people from the public, bought these bonds. All that can be said is, if it's make halal, is that at this later date when the government has the money from whatever income they have, they pay the money back to the owner. So it's basically just a loan. It's a qard hasana. It will be just a qard hasana. But then if it's a qard hasana, if it's just like a halal loan, then why would you call it a bond? The bond specifically has interest payments. It has a coupon and the rest of it. So yeah, bonds are not allowed off the bat. Any other questions, anyone?
I've got some more, but I think I'll take too much of the time.
I mean, if no one else has a question, you can always ask. But if anyone else has a question, I mean, I know I spoke a lot today, but because there's a lot to speak about. I mean, is what I said so shocking that no one has anything to ask? Because come on, guys, is there a reason why you guys are silent today? Is it so shockingly, amazingly mad that you're like, wow, I got nothing to say? Is that why no one's asking any questions other than one brother? Come on, guys, tell me. Why is no one asking any questions? Nothing to say? Is that clear? I mean, go on, bro. If you have a question to ask a question, ask away.
So for me, for example, like one issue I've had when it comes to like finding information is regarding, so for example, like say if I bought a share in BT, for example, and over time the price of the share goes up, which means what I put in then goes up. For example, if I put like £5 in BT shares in, and then within like a year, I might get like an extra sort of, I don't know, £5 or £10 add on top of that. Is that permissible?
So the thing is, I'd rather leave the discussions to shares when we actually come with the topic of musharaka, a business partnership. But essentially, in a nutshell, shares are monetization and a quantization of ownership. So imagine if as we're going to cover in later on for business partnerships, that basically is framed in me partnering with you when we do business together. But shares, all they've done is they've quantized that by separating the individuals from the company and made it something that can be bought and sold. That's basically what it is. So you're buying into certain rights or you're selling off your rights. That's basically what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So if the company has dividends to pay out or profits to make, your profits go out to their shareholders, that's fine. And if someone wants to sell you their share, they sell you their share, that's fine. In a nutshell. Another question. In prison, I have heard prisoners trade in products as they are not allowed to hold cash. Yeah. They are probably trading according to Sunnah more than us. Yes, except that if they're using cigarettes, which is haram, then that's another issue. But if they're trading in things such as halal, like imagine toothpicks. Imagine they all they had was toothpicks because that was what was available. And they were trading as toothpicks, and that would be more halal than what we have. It shows it can be done, I suppose. The thing is, this issue of riba, we can avoid it if you so choose to do so. You just have to want to do so, which is why I spent the time at the beginning laying down the groundwork for saying why riba is so evil and why we need to avoid it. Because we can't just stand here and say, oh, we got no choice. Because we actually do have a choice these days. Maybe in the 80s, in the 70s, and the 90s, we had no other choice. But today, we actually do have a choice. There are alternatives that actually do exist, and we can actually achieve long-distance transactions without the need for the banks. It does exist now. So all those people out there who want to do online commerce, online business, if you don't have Bitcoin as a payment option, then I think you're part of the problem. You are part of the problem. I'm not going to say you get a sin for it, but if you're not even allowing those who have opted out of the Riba system to use their Bitcoin to transact, you are even forcing them to remain in the system. You must accept Bitcoin and gold and silver and alternative means of currencies in your business. You must do so, because by refusing to accept other than riba, you are forcing everyone else to stay in the system. And everyone else is now saying, oh, I can't, I have no choice. But they have no choice because you as merchants don't allow it. So yeah, I would say every single Muslim merchant must accept other forms of halal payments as a wujub, because they're the ones who are receiving. As for the one who is paying, he's at the mercy of the one who is selling him the goods. He has to give them whatever they want. But one who's receiving, you can't, you don't demand them, it must give you X, Y, Z. You just say, pay me whatever on it. So if you say, I'll accept Bitcoin, then you're saying to them, Alhamdulillah, if you have Bitcoin, you have the halal alternative, I'll accept that because it's halal. But if you have nothing else in your person other than fiat and you've got no choice, but then you've got no choice. You must, guys, you must. Don't stop making excuses. You must add payment options for Bitcoin on your websites, whatnot. And if you have a shop, you must allow payment in gold and silver and all other forms of actual money. You must. It's a must. May Allah forgive us for our laziness. Ameen. There are ways out of Riba. Of course there are. 100%. Of course there are. And whoever says, oh, but the volatility of Bitcoin or the volatility of gold or it's hard to... Bruv, do you think these problems never existed before? Do you reckon that all those hadith I mentioned before about the serious nature of riba, that somehow because of convenience that wipes that away? So am I allowed to say, yeah, because of convenience I can commit zina? Because of convenience I can now eat the wealth of the yatim, which will actually less of a sin than riba, by the way, which we mentioned before, from the 7 deadly sins. Is there a case where convenience I can do sihr? Or convenience I can do shirk? Convenience only goes so far, guys. Convenience only goes so far.